All right, in this video, you are going to learn how to test your server-side container to actually validate that data is coming through. And hopefully you don't just believe it's magic and nothing will ever work inside the server-side container. All right, so we're gonna go through a couple things. Number one is we are going to start with your web container. So if you need to pause this video and just get a bunch of tabs open like I have here, you wanna pull up one tab that has your Google Tag Manager, the web container, have another tab that has your server-side container, and then we'll want to pull up your store. So I'm just using a test store here. If you have a staging site, that's fine too. And then make sure to have your admin open. And then last but not least, we'll have a couple, we'll be looking at a couple things in analytics. So we're just going to work our way down these bunch of tabs. So again, web container, server-side container, your Shopify store, front end, Shopify admin, and then Google Analytics. Once you have all those pulled up, then we're going to go through how to validate that sending data from your website to your server-side container actually works. And then we're actually going to see that data make its way back to Google Analytics. All right, so in your web-based container, you'll see I have two changes, and these are the only things that you have to do to test this out yourself. First thing, we're going to create a new Google Analytics variable. So just go to variables, create a new variable, and it'll be the variable type of Google Analytics. And I went ahead and created another property, which I would recommend as well. So inside of Google Analytics, what you can do here is go to admin, and then just create a new property. And that way you're not sending you're setting dummy data or test data to your real analytics account. So go ahead and do that. And then all you have to do is just grab your tracking ID. So just grab this and then paste this into the tracking ID here. The only other change you have to make in this is under advanced configuration that you'll see in the bottom. There's a little setting here called transport URL. And this needs to be your server-side subdomain. So the subdomain that you have created, go ahead and drop that into here, and that's it. So we have property ID, transport URL, and then you can just save it, and that's the variable that you need. The second thing in the web container is create a new tag. So this is just going to be a new universal analytics. So don't worry about an app plus web or anything else. Just create a new universal analytics. And we'll just do a page view, select that variable that you just created, and then add the all pages trigger. And that's it. So once you've done that, go ahead and put your GTM account into preview mode and then just refresh it and you're good to go. Next step, we have the web-based container. So the first thing that we'll need to do here is, server-side container. I'm sure I'll be saying web and server and getting them mixed up for several months. Under admin, if you go to container settings, the tagging server URL, change this to be your custom subdomain that you just created. So just drop that in there and then save, and that's all you have to do in this particular admin section. And then you're going to go back to your workspace here. So the triggers, so go ahead, this is probably going to be empty for you unless you've played around a little bit, but go ahead and create a new trigger, and just discard this and we'll go back. Before creating the trigger, confirm in your server-side account that you have these two clients. So one is called Universal Analytics and one is called App Plus Web. This should have been here automatically when you provision this new server. If you're not, just drop a note in our Facebook group so we can help out. But these should have been pre-created for you when you created your server-side container. All right, so you don't need to change anything with these. Just leave it as it is for the time being, and then go to triggers. So we're just going to create a new trigger, and this trigger is just going to be called Universal Analytics. So just call it Universal Analytics, and then the trigger name. So we're going to set the condition here for the trigger to be client name. So this is where the variables and triggers and how things work quite a bit different than the web-based container. So the client is actually going to be the trigger in this case. So do client name equals universal analytics, and that's it. So you don't need to set anything else. So essentially the way that this works is, if you recall just in the general overview of the server-side container, the client, which is new to the server-side container, is only available in the server-side container. This is essentially the thing that is taking the request. So when you're sending data to your, ecollect.yourdomain.com, the client is the one that's taking that request and saying, okay, what is this data? Let me do a bunch of things with it and make it available for any other marketing tag. So that's what the client is doing. Now the triggers, you can essentially create a trigger that you would assign to a Google Analytics tag and just say, hey, anytime someone sends a request into my server-side container that looks like a Google Analytics hit, then just send it automatically or trigger the tag that I have assigned to this. So it's really hard to explain like this, but hopefully you'll get the hang of it as we go through. And I think you'll learn by doing versus me trying to explain all that to you. So we have the trigger, you have universal analytics, and go ahead and create one more. So we're just going to create one more transaction complete trigger. So this event name, and this just to show you a little bit of a different way to create a trigger. So the event name is going to be matches, regex, and then transaction complete. If you went ahead and copied in that thank you page snippet into your thank you page, which we'll go over to this. So this was the hard-coded, just sending basically a direct hit to your server-side container, and the event action that was set in this file that you should have. The event action was called transaction complete. So you can create that trigger over in your server-side container and just say event name matches regex transaction complete, and that's it. You don't need to worry about anything with this. So that's just two examples. So you have, again, the one trigger is universal analytics. I'm going to show you how that works. And then transaction complete is another trigger. And we're actually going to use that for Facebook next week. So you do have the ability to create different triggers that are somewhat similar to what you might be used to in Google Tag Manager web container, where you have your transaction complete, add to cart, product view, etc. But there is just different ways to do it in the server-side container as well. All right, next up, we are going to go to tags, and I'll just walk through the process of creating a new tag here. We're going to create two new tags. So we'll do new tag is going to be the universal analytics. So all you have to do is just select this, and that's literally it. Just select that tag, and then the trigger is going to be the universal analytics trigger you just created, and you can just leave this as is. So you don't need to do anything else, and you can just save it, and you're good to go. The second tag is going to be the app plus web property type, and this you should have created. You should have created the app plus web property already, so you have that in your Google Analytics account. So just create the app plus web tag type, and then the measurement ID. You'll recall in the previous training where you created the new app plus web property, you have a data stream. If you click into the data stream, you have your measurement ID up top here. So go ahead and copy that, and then head back to your server-side container, and then you just paste that in here. And then the event name for this one, we'll just call it a page view. You'll see that Google has all the predefined events for the app plus web property here, but in this example, we're just going to use page view. And then add the trigger. So the trigger for this, it's the same trigger. We're using universal analytics. So if you recall, I'd mentioned in the previous training where you can use your existing data layer. So the data layer that we have at Elevar and we use for universal analytics, you can use that same data layer and the same data structure, and it will essentially work for your app plus web property for the most part. There's some intricacies with it, but for the most part, it's Google's made it easy to support both while using one data layer. So that's it. So try to ignore the Facebook purchase. We'll be going through that soon, but you'll have the two tags here, GA Universal Analytics and then GA App Plus Web. Alrighty, so now it's time to preview. So very important before you preview, make sure that you made that change in the admin and you set that to your custom subdomain that needs to be your subdomain. So go ahead and click preview. And then what this is going to open up is this is the new preview mode for your server-side container. It's not like the little window that you generally would see here if we go over to the store. This is the web-based container preview mode, and this is the server-side preview mode. Now it is game time. So we have our web-based container that's in preview mode where we added the new server-side test property with a new server-side variable. And let's go ahead and refresh this page. And I'm going to actually go to one more page here. All right, so now we've triggered 2 page views, 1 home page view, 1 product view. Now let's go back to our server-side container. All right, success. So we have 2 page view hits. And what you can do here, these page views, these are the events. So you can click into the event name, and then you'll see what tags were fired on that event and then what were not. And you'll notice that we had both of the tags created in the server-side container. They were successful. And now you can actually go through and view the variables. So these are the variables that I've created in my container, and there's a few default variables in addition to the event data. So the event data that you see here, this is most comparable to if you are used to looking at like the data layer in the web container. This is how I like to look at or compare to the event data. So you're going to see a lot of the similar data here that comes through. We won't go through line by line on all of this, but this was the home page. This was the product page. So you can see the page title here, the test product Elevar store. And we have a few of just the sample parameters that were sent along. So this product view, you'll notice if we recall, if we go back here to the tag, this was just a generic tag. We didn't set this to use the data layer, this variable to use the data layer. We could do that, and then we would see some of the more enhanced e-commerce data. But for now, just focus on page view. I just want to see you have success getting a hit inside your server-side container. All right, so now we should be done, and our data is in the server-side container. But let's actually go to analytics. So in that new test property that you created, go ahead and head over to the real-time overview, and you should see that this property has now active pages from the product page. So you can just see I'm on the product page here, and let me go ahead and just navigate. Let's go to the cart page. And we'll wait for this to update here. All right, so you can see this property, which is, again, the only data connection to this Google Analytics property is just coming from my server-side container, and that's it. So that's pretty cool. Now let's head over to the App Plus Web property. This is also the real-time view, and it's quite a bit different than what you might be used to. And you can see here, this is just giving us some data from the last couple minutes. And you'll see we have our page views here, our test product, this is the most recent one. We're in the shopping cart, and we can see the event name. So these are the page views that have counted over the last 5 or 10 minutes. So again, this property, you didn't do anything other than there is one tag, one measly tag and variable set up in your web-based container. You sent it to your server-side container. You have 2 tags in here. Again, you didn't have to do anything. You just created a trigger called Universal Analytics, and that's it. You assign that to both tags, and you loaded up the site, and you saw the different page views that were coming through, like the shopping cart. So if you made it this far, congrats. This took a long time to ultimately wrap my head around how this works. So great job doing that. So now let's circle back around to the thank you page script that you copied into your site on the previous training. So this is outside of Google Tag Manager. So this is showing you another way that you can send data to your server-side container. So in this case, it's just an image pixel here. And I'm going to head over to where I'm going to go. We'll go to our orders. And one thing to note here is just for testing purposes, I don't have the script wrapped in if first time accessed just for testing so we can get the conversion data. But if this was in a live environment, we would want that wrapped in the if first time accessed. So it only fires on the first order. So let's go ahead and just view an order status page here. And if you want to place a test order for us on a staging site, you can do that as well. So I'm just going to show you here. This is the magic pixel. Again, you don't want to copy that and use it on your production environment for too long here. But you'll have your pixel here in a thank you page. And let's head back to our preview mode. And we have our transaction complete. So this is the transaction complete here. And you'll see we have a bunch of the dynamic data coming through. So you have your shipping, your tax, your transaction ID, and then these are some of the custom parameters that are included in that pixel tag that you have. So that's this is showing the transaction complete process that worked as we'd expected. Let's head over to the tag section here, and we can see we had 3 tags that ended up firing. We have both of the Google Analytics and then the Facebook purchase as well, which we'll be getting into shortly. So that was a success. Let's pop over to Universal Analytics and take a look here. We have our top active pages. Let's look at the events that have fired, and we see the event category, measurement protocol, and the event action was transaction complete. So that was a win-win. All right, so all you have to do is follow these steps step by step. And just to make it very clear here, what we're going through is just basically getting you familiar with how to send data to your server-side container and then how it ultimately routes to different channels. This is not going to be a production environment ready set up for you where you'd want to launch everything full-time for analytics or Facebook when we get into that. So just keep that in mind. This is just for test demo purposes, and that's it. And also just to get you familiar with the process of creating a tag, creating a trigger, creating variables, and then connecting your web container to your server-side container, and then following that all the way through to Google Analytics and eventually Facebook. So that's it. If you have any questions, drop them in the Facebook group.